All right, so what we're going to do now, in hopefully a quick couple of minutes, is to give you an indication as to how this works, generating questions and making connections, how this works with actual reading. And what I've done is I've pulled a section from a textbook that you might find online. So as I mentioned, maybe previously, that a lot of instructors are moving to online textbooks, ones that you don't have to pay for, which is a really great thing. And so that's what I'm pulling for you here, because even though it's online, and I think sometimes read differently online, we read quicker, maybe do more skimming and scanning, that it's important for us to understand that this is still textbook reading, and it's still something that we need to really pay attention to. And so this is a textbook section on memory. If you remember back when we did the pre-reading piece, I pulled something about memory. This is just an extension of this. So this is titled Problems with Memory. And what we're always going to do first is start with a pre-read, because that is very important. It warms our brain up. Again, we wouldn't run a marathon without stretching. And so pre-reading kind of acts as that stretch. And it will also prepare our brain for what's coming next. And again, a couple of things about pre-reading is that we do it in short sections. And so we're only going to look at a small part of this. I'll pre-read the entire section, but we'll actually only be doing the connections and questions for one very small part of that. And so we're trying to get our brain ready to go. We're trying to open up those folders in our brain about the particular topic that we're working on. Because as we know, new knowledge will stick best to knowledge that's already in the brain. And so we want to activate that prior knowledge, figure out what we might already know about a subject, and if we don't know anything, create that new folder. So to get started, I'm not going to go in any particular order. You guys have the signs strategy, where we look at subheadings and headings. We look at the intro, we look at graphics. We look at names or vocabulary in the N, and then the S is the summary or the questions at the end. So what I'm going to do is just go in order. So we're going to start at the top, and this is called Problems with Memory. You might already be thinking about some of the problems we have with memory. Any of you that have Alzheimer's in your family, or friends, or working in a care unit, you might encounter that. I also think of amnesia as something else that might be a problem with my memory. Old age, we forget names and things as we get a little bit older. There is a picture here, and to me it doesn't have a whole lot to do with anything exactly, probably just there for interest. Then we see section 1, and here is an intro, and we're going to go ahead and read that to kind of maybe activate some additional prior knowledge. So it says, you may pride yourself on your amazing ability to remember the birth dates and ages of all your friends and family members, or you may be able to recall vivid details of your 5th birthday party at Chuck E. Cheese's. However, all of us have at times felt frustrated and even embarrassed when our memories have failed us. There are several reasons why this has happened. And there were some perfect connections to prior knowledge. Right? If you are the one who can remember phone numbers, birth dates, etc., that might be you, and that frustration might also be you. Continuing on with pre-reading, we see problems with memory again. We see section 2, amnesia. And this is a connection to what I had made prior when I talked about both Alzheimer's and amnesia. I see amnesia here is bolded. Probably is that it's an important word I'm going to have to remember, because it's both a heading and a bolded vocab word. Then I see anterograde amnesia, which I'm not familiar with. I see this diagram. So it talks about past and present. The event is in the middle. Retro is on one side. Anterograde is on the other. One thing I might know about retro, and for those of you who maybe took the prior reading class, retro means back. And so that might be something that I can use to help me. So retrograde amnesia maybe has something to do with the past. And again, it's in this direction. So that might be something that I can connect to. I also see retrograde amnesia here again as a bolded word, a vocab word, wondering if it maybe isn't a connection or an opposite of anterograde amnesia. And then I see that there is a video story here that I might consider looking at for extra information. Now this is where I'm going to stop with my pre-read because this is as far as we're going to really look. You notice down here at the bottom I could continue on. There's 8 pages in this particular section, but we're going to stop here. All right, so that pre-read didn't take us a long time. We didn't get to the summary questions at the end, but that's okay. I would probably, for sake of time, we're going to kind of skip out on those questions, but definitely in your own textbooks, when you have the time, take a look at those. All right, so what we're going to do next is take a look at least this first section in terms of connections and generating questions. Now, one of the downfalls with an online textbook, unless you can find an app, and there are those out there, you are not able to write in your textbooks if it's online, because I cannot click on this and have a little box show up. There are apps that will allow you to do that. Printed textbooks, I'm going to highly encourage you to write in your textbook. It's a great reading strategy and something that you should find a way to do that. You can use Post-it notes if you really don't want to write in your textbook, and that will be the subject of next week's lesson, but just kind of as a disclaimer. So I'm going to talk through this. Ideally, if you can write these things down, sometimes it is better because it forces your brain to actually do the work. So with that being said, here is the beginning of amnesia. So what I'm going to do first is start out by asking a question. It just gives me the topic of amnesia, and I'm going to form that into a question. So I want to know by the end of this, a very logical question: what is amnesia? Maybe how does one get amnesia? Why does amnesia occur? So I've asked what it is, how it happens, why it happens, who is affected perhaps. So I'm just going through those 5W questions in the H. So I'm going to find out what is amnesia, how it happens, and why it happens. It's going to be my purpose question. So amnesia is a loss of long-term memory that occurs as the result of disease, physical trauma, or psychological trauma. Psychologist Tolving, 2002, and his colleagues at the University of Toronto studied KC for years. Casey suffered a traumatic head injury in a motorcycle accident and then had severe amnesia. Tolving writes, "The outstanding fact about Casey's mental makeup is his utter inability to remember any events, circumstances, or situations from his own life. His episodic amnesia covers his whole life from birth to the present. The only exception is the experiences that at any time he has had in the last minute or two." So a couple of things about amnesia. I'm a little curious. I don't know what episodic amnesia is, and so that's a question that I have. I would probably put a question mark over episodic amnesia. A connection. When I think of amnesia, I a lot of times think of movies where people are laying in a hospital bed and they wake up and they have no idea. It happens in soap operas all the time, where they wake up and something tragic has happened and they have no idea what happened in their life. So that's a connection that I can make. It also reminds me a little bit of cartoons, when those cartoon characters get hit in the head with a hammer or something like that. Those old Bugs Bunny commercials, and they kind of have that dazed look on their face. That's what it reminds me of. And so that is a common connection that people make with amnesia. All right, we're going to move down to anterograde amnesia. I don't know what anterograde means. And so that's a question. What is anterograde amnesia? There are 2 common types of amnesia: anterograde amnesia and retrograde amnesia. And right here with retrograde amnesia, I am making that connection with retro, meaning back. So it must have something to do with the past. I'm going to then assume that antero has something to do with moving forward, present, future. Anterograde amnesia is commonly caused by brain trauma, such as a blow to the head. With anterograde amnesia, you cannot remember new information, although you can remember information and events that happened prior to your injury, which fits with my my thought before. It has something to do with the present. So anterograde means I can't remember the present, but I can remember the past. The hippocampus is usually affected. Hippocampus is a new word for me. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I know it has something to do with the brain, but I could not give you a direct definition. So that might be a question that I have, is what is the hippocampus and what part does it play? This suggests that damage to the brain has resulted in the inability to transfer information from short-term to long-term memory. That is the inability to consolidate memories. If I look at that sentence, that takes a little bit of digestion because I'm not exactly sure because it's talking about transferring information from short-term to long-term memory and the ability to consolidate. So bring things together is kind of what I'm asking there, and that might be something that I need to clarify with my instructor. Many people with this form of amnesia are unable to form new episodic or semantic memories, but are still able to form new procedural memories. Now, lots of new words in here. What is semantic? What is episodic? And what is procedural? One thing that I can say from procedural is I wonder if it has to do with following a procedure. So that's maybe a connection. Procedural, procedure seems to make sense. Episodic, episode, maybe it's just a short little snippet, but those might be questions that I want to ask my instructor. Now, it's probably also discussed prior to this section, and so if you didn't know, you probably could go back and check that out. All right, this was true of HM, which was discussed earlier. The brain damage caused by his surgery resulted in anterograde amnesia. HM would read the same magazine over and over, having no memory of ever reading it. It was always new to him. He could also not remember people he had met after his surgery. If you were introduced to HM and then you left the room for a few minutes, he would not know you upon your return and would introduce himself to you again. However, when presented the same puzzle several days in a row, although he did not remember having seen the puzzle before, his speed at solving it became faster each day because of relearning. Now, I can just connect and say, wow, because how terrible would it be to constantly have that Groundhog Day feeling? That's a connection you might be able to make, right? That over and over, I've seen this before, but I can't remember it, kind of a thing. How frustrating for his caregivers and for his family. But it also makes me think of there must be something happening in the brain where there's a cutoff, because he can learn it and he gets faster. So obviously parts of his brain are remembering it, but his memory is not. And so that's kind of weird to me. So that's a question that I might need more clarification on. Moving down to this last paragraph, this diagram illustrates the timeline of retrograde and anterograde amnesia. Memory problems that extend back in time before the injury and prevent retrieval of information previously stored in long-term memory are known as retrograde amnesia. Conversely, memory problems that extend forward in time from the point of injury and prevent the formation of new memories are called anterograde. So again, from the event, problems with the event to the present, anterograde. Problems with the past, the event in backwards is retrograde. This appears to me to be the kind of stuff that those soap opera characters often find themselves in. They've lost years of their life. This, though, hopefully gave you just a quick little synopsis of how this process actually works. That did take me a while to read and to go through all that. It would not for you. I was talking a lot out loud, and you guys would be making those connections on your own and then moving on. So if I were to think of those things, put a question mark and move on, it would not take me as long as it did for me to do this think aloud. So this is what you're going to be asked to do for your homework. You're going to take an article and also a piece of your textbook and mark questions, make connections, and continue on reading as you go and make your marks. And then we'll talk about that next week when I see you. So have a great week. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out via email or stop into my office, which is room 124. Have a great day.